Welcome to another episode of the Wandering Watercolor. Let's paint. So this one today is the third page of the Jungle Animals Watercolor Coloring book that I make. If you're interested in anything that I make, just look in the description. I do sell everything online. And I do make the prints using lithographs on actual watercolor paper, so it's nice and it won't bleed through. So for this one, we are going to be painting this Mandrill baboon. As always, you just want a scrap piece of paper, a plate to mix your colors, usually a porcelain dish of some sort. This is a soap dish. A palette. This is just paint that I make. And people keep wanting me to start selling it again, so that's what I'm working on. And then 2 jars of water on the side and a brush. Any brush works. So let's get started. First thing that we will paint, actually, I'm going to clean up my palette here. I got a little bit of green in my yellow. I'll rinse that off. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to add, the Mandrill baboons have this kind of like highlight around their beard. That's basically what I'm doing here. So first I'm just going to kind of fill this in like this. Going around his face. Oops. Went a little bit outside. That's okay. Like that. I'm just going to fill that in. I'm going to rinse my brush. And then I'm also going to grab a little bit of the light brown that I have and mix it in with a little bit of the red and the yellow. And then just going to use this mixture to do a couple of just small marks while it's wet. Just kind of give it that little bit of a variation in there, like that. I'm gonna rinse my brush, and next, most of the animal has kind of a brownish gray coat, and so we need to mix a lot of that. The way that we'll do that is we'll grab a little bit of the light brown. Actually, better use the dark brown. Use the dark brown. Use dark brown. And I need to get a good amount of pigment, so that's kind of why I'm rubbing my brush against it, so I can pick up a lot of the pigment. And then also get a little bit of the dark blue, because that'll give us a nice... When you mix blue and brown together, I find that's when you get like the really nice... Wait, actually, hold on a second. Let me just double check, because I think this seems a little... Yeah, that's the dark blue. That's the dark blue. Okay, or really leans more to a phthalo blue. But basically, brown and blue make really nice grays and off grays, and brown grays and blue grays. And so that's what I'm mixing up here. I do want it to be a little more on the blue side. And also, because there's so much that needs to be covered, I do need to mix up a good amount of it. So that's why you see me, I keep going back and forth between my jar of water and the mixture, and I keep adding more water to it. And then I'm just going to grab more of the blue. And it's actually interesting to watch it as it mixes, because now you can see how the mixture itself looks a lot more blue. As soon as we grab some of the brown and mix it up, it shifts it back more towards the gray, and I'm definitely going to need a little more of that. And because there is a bit of yellow in brown, you can see how it gives it a little bit of a gray tint, or a green tint. If we add a little bit of red, that'll actually help balance that out. because green and red are complementary colors. So adding that red can help neutralize it a little more. And so this color, that's actually a pretty good gray. Yeah, I mean, I want it to be a little more blue than that, a little more to on the blue side. So that's why I keep grabbing the blue here and add more water. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I'm just gonna use this mixture and this start filling the entire baboon here, Mandrill baboon. Terrifying animal, although really one of the more colorful animals. Interesting. Very interesting to look at. And you've noticed that all I'm doing is I'm applying what's called a flat wash, which is where you're just blocking in the color. And that's it. You're not doing anything else. You just want to establish where those values are. That's it. I'm just filling in the fingers, toes, everything. Like that. And while you're filling it in, if you go outside of the lines a little bit, it's totally not a big deal whatsoever. Now remember that this does look dark, but all watercolors dry lighter. So even though it'll look a little darker right now, as it dries, it does become lighter. Just kind of fill all that in. And here for the lips, I'm just going to leave like a little bit of a space and just fill in the rest out here. Maybe grab a little bit of water. You can always fade it out a little bit. Like that. It's almost like using a marker. You're just blocking it in. That's what always this initial stage reminds me of, just because you're literally just filling in the color. Okay. Like that. So we have all that. I'll rinse my brush. If you feel like it, you can always pick up some of the excess color by putting a wet brush down and then just kind of like working it in. Once it's dry, it makes it harder, but while it's still wet, you can always just pick up that excess if you feel like it. If you feel like you've added a little too much, but I think this is fine. So the next thing, I'm gonna grab some of the sepia, or light brown as I like to call it. I'm going to add a little more of the burnt umber to it. I'm going to mix the light brown and the dark brown, and the reason being is I want kind of like an in-between to cover in the log that the monkey is standing on. So I'm just covering that in. Same technique, just blocking in the color. That's it. Nothing else, or nothing more, nothing less. Just filling in the color And later on, we'll add some texture to the wood, even though obviously it's the drawing that's already there obviously shows more than enough texture, but emphasizing it with some shadows just makes it look better. I'm gonna rinse my brush. And the next thing is to get the background color, the green. So I'm just gonna grab some green. Yeah, water. And that's pretty much the mixture that we need for the background. All I'm doing here is just filling everything in, just like we did with the monkey. All we're doing is filling it in. I'm just avoiding the key details like the teeth and kind of like the nose here. And grab a little bit of water, dilute it, spread that out. There we go. A little more. I normally have these brushes. The brush that I'm using is normally the brush that I carry on my online store, but I may switch it out for a bigger brush just because I find that sometimes I wish that the brush was bigger as I'm painting this size. Just by like 1 or 2 sizes up. It doesn't need to be very big. That being said though, a size 8 is still perfectly adequate, as you can tell, for this size paintings. Or any brush really. I've painted this size paintings with much larger brushes before. I actually prefer having a larger brush. I feel like it's much quicker. Okay, so I'm just filling all that in like that. And down here. Okay, that looks pretty good. Just gonna rinse my brush and dry it off. So the next step is to get a little bit of the red and mix it up here. Add some water. Okay, let's see what that looks like. That's pretty much what we need. So it's the face of the baboon is very red. So I think you may want to add a little more water so it's a little more transparent. But basically, this part, I'm just going to fill this in and I'll try to avoid the teeth as I'm painting it in. But everything else is for sure getting painted red. Okay, so just adding that, just avoiding the teeth as much as possible. Like that. Up here. Nose. Like that. Also, a little ear back here. Same thing. Okay. Miss my brush. Dry it off. Now I do have to give this a moment to dry. And while that's drying, we can go ahead and refocus back onto the coat. I'm going to grab a little bit of the blue. Maybe darken it up a little bit. Maybe a little bit of purple. Wet my brush. There we go. A little more blue. Like that. And so now I can use this mixture to layer on top of the coat, but this time I'm going to be using short brush strokes and establishing shadows and texture. So for example, over here where the eyes are, I'm just going to go right around the eyes and do like that to create little shadows for how the kind of like the eyes recede into the skull. And then I'm just going to add little brush strokes here to show, like covering all this in, and then brush strokes for the hair, the texture of the hair, just like that, going around here, a little bit up here like that, up here, maybe cover a bunch back here since it's more in shadow, imagining that the light is coming from the right, and then just short brush strokes to really create that three-dimensional feel, both form and texture. I'm gonna do some strokes right here, a little bit here. Back here like that. All of this covering it in shadow. All of the tail that's kind of hanging back here and then here, and then adding more texture up here. Just short brush strokes just to show the fur. Maybe wet my brush a little more while I pick up some more of the darker paint. And up here, kind of following the drawing, but also adding as I see fit. If I think if there's a place that needs a little more or a little less, like that. And then back here, all of this I'm going to paint it darker. That way we can separate the hand that's in the front, as well as back here the other leg, the one that's further back, same thing, like that. The chest up here, I'm going to paint all of that much darker. And just create some texture with short brush strokes like that. The last portion is over here on the other arm. Just make sure I have the line work just to show where the shadow is and the hair. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. Up here I do want to add a little more just to kind of cover that in. I didn't realize it was so white. There we go. I'm gonna rinse my brush. And now I'm gonna grab a little more red, since I do want to emphasize some of that red over here like that. Here in the nose. A little bit back here. Maybe a little bit on the tongue. A little bit on the lips. Okay. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of the light brown. Maybe a little bit of purple. Mix those two together on the red. I'm gonna mix that up, and then also add again a little more red. That'll give us kind of like a darker red mixture, which I can then apply to use as a shadow. Like that. Create a little more space. Definitely fill in the nostrils here with the darker mixture. There we go. Now, again, keep in mind it'll look darker and more desaturated when it's dry. So this is really more just to emphasize. I'm gonna rinse my brush, dry it off. And next, I want to actually grab some of this blue here. And with the blue, all I'm gonna do is add a little bit kind of like around the outside right here. Like that. And same on this side, like that. Rinse my brush, dry it off a little bit. Still a little bit of moisture and color on there. I'm just gonna do that. Dry it off and then pull off the excess. So I'm basically fading that out. Now while we let all of this dry, then we can focus back on the background. So what we'll do is we'll add some green, add a good amount of green here. Grab some of the light brown, mix it up together. And we want to add more green to that mixture. So that looks good. And basically, just kind of sporadically fill in between the leaves that you see in the background. Because what that'll do is it'll create a little bit of variation, but you don't want it to be too organized, partially because you don't want... The background is not a point of focus, so you don't want it to distract from the main object, but you do just want to add some marks here and there, which give it a little bit of depth. Like that. Here, like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're just really establishing some variation in the background, which makes the whole piece more interesting to look at. It also kind of gives that illusion of, you know, how busy a jungle background would be. And I do want to grab a little bit of the darker brown and mix it up here so that we can use that for the shadow in the on the tree branch that the monkey's sitting on. So I'm just gonna fill in this entire side right here like that, and then just some thin lines on top just to create some of that texture, and bottom a little darker. That's good on that. And I do want to grab some of the yellow, kind of mix it up with that mixture just so we can fill in those teeth. Like I don't want it to be very obvious, but the teeth need to be a little darker than the white of the paper, because they wouldn't be so white. Just kind of filling that in. Rinse my brush. And I'm going to step back. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for that one. So I like how that one turned out, very vibrant. The animal itself is pretty vibrant and usually lives in vibrant environments. That one took 25 minutes, so not bad. If you have any questions, shoot me a message, send me an email, whatever works. I usually try to respond within 24 hours. I'll try to leave everything in the description if you're interested in trying the book or my paint. Hopefully I'll have it out by the time the book comes out. I do have an 11-month-old, so that definitely slows things down. But I appreciate you, and I hope you have a great day.